ask a question? Because I'm from that era. Did your parents ever discuss why they chose East Africa, Tanzania, as the place to go?
Was it Arusha?
I'm
Were
sorry.
you in Arusha?
Yeah.
That was a very big. I've been in Arusha myself.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what's
So
that?
you know.
What's it about? I'm
So,
sorry. I'm
Well, there were a lot of missionaries, a lot of service, a lot of schools, and the schools were a lot of orphans.
So she said.
Yeah, it was. That's where I volunteered, actually.
Still is today, really,
Yeah.
right? I mean, even
Right,
today,
the
there's
streets
just
are all
like,
dirt roads.
Yeah,
I lived
yeah.
with the locals.
yeah,
And you're right. No hot water.
yeah. I
Okay.
know.
Electricity on and off.
Oh, wow.
So you know,
Okay.
Arusha,
A lot
you know,
of Peace Corps
Peter
folks down there at all?
I don't know if the Peace Corps is still there. I'm sure it is,
I'm
but
sure
you know
there's
the
some
government is so
somewhere.
corrupt.
Yeah.
I mean, I even got stopped at gunpoint.
Yeah.
You know, when
That's
we
like
were-
a normal thing. Right?
Right.
Everyone's gotten stopped
Yeah,
at
you know,
gunpoint. Yeah.
very strange.
Yeah.
The government makes it very difficult
Yeah.
for everyday folks to
Yeah.
succeed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
during the Black Panther days, the whole issue of there were new Marcus
Garvey,
Garvey kinds
yeah.
of
Yeah.
movements and others back
Yeah.
to Africa, and then a lot of
I have to ask my
disillusionment.
mom, like, why specifically that
East Africa.
part of
And-
Africa.
And
Why
there
there?
was
Yeah.
another Panther, Geronimo Pratt.
We know, my parents know him well.
Yeah, didn't
Yeah.
he?
He
Was,
recently died.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, but
he had settled in East
yeah,
Africa.
in Arusha
Right,
as well.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
There was actually
Yeah.
a documentary
Yeah.
done on him.
Yeah,
now I'm thinking
yeah.
about it.
Yeah,
It was really
my parents
wonderful.
know him well.
Yeah, he
Geronimo
had spent a lot of
Pratt,
time
yeah.
in jail.
Yeah, a lot of time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And Secturo, he was what was he here? You know, from the SNCC that went on to
Stokely Carmichael?
no,
He changed his name.
oh, Stokely Carmichael.
Right,
that's
exactly.
Secturo or something. I'm trying to remember his name. Yeah,
Today,
yeah,
right.
he went
Toure,
down there.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And he actually passed about
Yeah.
4 or 5 years
Yeah,
ago.
okay,
Yeah,
that's right. Wow.
He was married to Marion Makeba. Do you remember that name?
Is that right?
Yes.
He was married to Miriam Makeba.
Yeah.
She was. Oh my God! What
A
amazing.
South African
Yeah, I
singer.
remember. I
yeah,
know her.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I know Mary
Absolutely
McKeever.
amazing. Yeah.
Wow, wow.
Right.
Small world, small world.
This is
There's good
interesting.
synergy here.
I
it's
know,
great.
amazing.
But lives flash before us in all kinds of different
Wow,
ways.
wow.
It's quite amazing. So here's, entre nous, in a sense. Here's my, I'm gonna like trademark it at some point if we can afford it. But what I'm getting into is a concept of contagious empathy. Trying to figure out how do we create training, programs, retreats, videos, live sociodrama, webinars, because we're going to figure out how to monetize it as well.
So you can pay your liability.
Because I think people are sick, particularly in organizations, but also regarding to personal growth, kinds of potential clients. And I think I shared in my introduction, a lot of potential people who may be, interested in this. Nonprofits, community organizations, educational institutions, from kids right up. And empathy within a faculty lounge, for God's sakes. There's so many issues here. And, your experience has been so much professionally, the lack thereof in many areas, both system-wide, but also in regard to, teachers should be there saying, hey, we're all with a cause, but in different ways. And instead, the internalized oppression of being a teacher causes teachers to go at one another and to have little kind of cliques. And so that, come on in and grab what you like.
I'm sorry.
I am. I'm grabbing what I like.
Other
Except it's going in the wrong direction.
founder
Hey.
holding another door there.
Have a plate.
No, I want you.
You want me? Okay. I'll go.
Oh,
Plate comes second.
so they're married.
Okay.
They're also both, this is their firm.
Okay.
So, and that hit me as part of what I want to try to do. So the death by PowerPoint kinds of stuff, the talking at people, the whole thing that training isn't learning, kind of a piece. So how do we? And it really is around storytelling. I was reading an article a number of months ago in the New York Times Sunday Review, and it really talked about empathy and issues in regarding to how do we get Ferguson white folks and leaders and cops and teens and young fathers who are black to understand how can people empathize one with another. And as the politics gets worse and worse in the country, how do you get people from the extremes to, you know, and part of my life has tried to be to try to survive ethically. We all struggle on that. And how can I have discussions with people, and I'm thinking of particular examples, in which I can find ways to bridge something while still not selling myself out in order for folks to rethink something rather than it's always an either or a but rather than an and in what's going on in the country. So how one of the thoughts for me when I read the article which said research shows it's not so easy to train people into empathy or to cause people to be empathic, particularly around areas that are not of the self. So I can be empathic towards my kid, but if the neighbor moves in who's a different cultural background, their kid I may have no empathy with. So how do we work on this at adult, at young levels, at corporate and nonprofit? And part of it it began to feel like storytelling. And so, and then Harold and I had a breakfast together, and
A couple.
first of all, I wanted to say the woman. The woman who didn't want to talk about her age was laughing at us about breakfast. I
Okay.
just want you to know, I'm not going to go further than that as to what stereotype she uses. It's okay. It's okay.
Tea with honey. Oatmeal. So, go ahead.
So the idea is to engage people in sharing authentically their own stories. When I say their own, it may be their own, or it may be something we've heard, experienced, observed as close to the reality. So if it may be a secondary source, not the primary source. So like I'm working in a workshop and there's this older African American man in a social work conference that I'm facilitating, and we're talking about race, and there's blacks and whites and Hispanic, all kinds. And he says, well, this is a story actually, and he says, oh no, I never experienced racism. And he was raised in Alabama or and from a young boy, and he said, you know, I'm just a person, and I'm, you know, and other people are saying, well, you know, didn't you have an experience? No, I don't have those kinds of experiences. And he's like, you know, like you, like late 60s, and he's been through a lot of issues. And he talked about education, social work, right? I mean, my God, the abuse and the lack of appreciation and the targeting and all that you get by your family and friends and the society around, those kinds of things. So as we're sharing and talking, he starts talking about, well, maybe I have some memory. Maybe this, you know, I have a story. And this is after other people are telling stories. And then he starts telling a story of remembering, and I really want to be true to the story because as we tell stories, sometimes they
Yeah,
get
they get
related.
like, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And he says he remembers when he was like 5, 6 years old, and there were dirt roads in the South, and in those days, you know, black and white kids would play till adolescence, and then they weren't allowed to play anymore. But there was a lot more mixes than people talk about. In any case, he was home with his dad. His mom had died, and his dad was in a wheelchair and all this. And so his dad asked him to go to the general store down the road to get some supplies for the house, and he gave him a list of stuff to go down and get. And so he walks and whistling down the road, dirt road, to the general store. And the general store is owned by white people with black people working there. And and he gets in there, and there's this line of people ordering things. So he gets behind. This is a 6-year-old kid, and he's behind, and he waits, and then his turn, and then finally he gets to the front of the line, and he says, okay, here's my dad's list of what I need. And all of a sudden, out of a Cadillac comes this big white dude who's known in the community. Big Stetson hat, the whole stereotype, white Cadillac. And said, excuse me, boy, and he goes right to the front of the line. And the black kid says, excuse me, sir, you're butting in. You know, and that's the language that, you know, in school, you're butting in. He says, don't sass me back, boy. And he continues, excuse me, sir, it's my turn first. So, says, aren't you Joe's kid? Last name? He says, yeah, he's my dad. Get in here, Richard. Sit in. No, you're not interrupting anything.
Oh,
Good
Sit here,
evening.
sit here.
good evening.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, all right.
Good, Harold.
Hi, man.
Good to see you. Richard.
So you got Tony, how are you?
Such a pleasure,
You
Richard.
too, man.
doing?
Timberly. How are
Pleasure,
you?
Richard.
What is it here?
And don't crowd Nathan and
pleasure. Richard, nice to meet you.
Richard. Don't crowd Nathan and Blue. Okay.
Oh,
Certainly. I'll do the best I can.
Okay.
You get yours also. Make it more official. Nice to meet you, sir.
This is Tony.
How you doing? Good to see you again. You worked at Fellowship Farms, remember?
Oh yeah, I
If you're
remember. That's
hungry,
right.
there are
He was-
sandwiches and stuff.
Okay, thank you very much.
He gave the instructions on
Turkey.
how to use that rope swing.
Oh yes.
Oh, really?
I love that rope swing. That was very cool.
Thank you.
I remember that very well.
So this 68-year-old man is telling the story. Social
It's
worker.
in the 60s days.
I know.
What the
What
heck?
is this?
What the heck?
68,
Since she's 68, I say.
All right.
Oh, she's getting a little pissed now. Twice, 3 times. So
You're really making it.
So he's in the line in Alabama at the general store, and excuse me, sir, you're butting in. So aren't you Joe's boy? He said, yes. You keep talking like that, sass me back. I'm going to settle it with your dad because he knows me. He doesn't work for me. And he butts in, and the guy says, but sir, he says, I've had it with you. He picks up the kid by the collar, walks out, storms out the store, opens the back of his Cadillac door, throws the kid in the back seat, gets in the car, and drives down the road because he knows where the father lives. He gets out of the car, takes the kid, picks him up, throws him on, opens the screen door, throws him on the floor. The father looks up, says, what happened? What's going on? And this big guy walks in. Hello, Mr. Whoever that is, you know. I said, what's going on? What happened with my son? And the father asked, and the guy says, listen, your boy is sassing me. And either you give him a licking, or I'm going to do it. The father asked the boy to come here, puts him on his knee, over his lap, pulls his pants down, and with tears rolling down his eyes, the father's eyes, he beats his son to protect his son from being beaten by the white guy.
What year did this happen?
I'm assuming in the early 60s. And this is a man who said, I never experienced racism. Now,
He had buried that, obviously.
yeah, but those kinds of stories, whether they're my story or what I authentically heard and can tell compellingly, to me, is a way to have people stop their breath, whether they're far right, far left, black, white, Latino, you know, whatever. And then here's the thing, this is a Malthusian kind of thing I'm thinking of. And then now, in the group, that's a story I've just shared. And Harold, you have your story, which everybody has their stories. And now I'm going to say to the people in the webinar, or the people in the workshop, or the people in the room, when you were listening to that story, what story came up for you about your own life that maybe had nothing to do with that story, but you couldn't suppress that thought or feeling came up? Whoever's willing to go first, I want you to share your story. And I'm assuming this is a mixed group. In corporations, gay, straight, older, younger, different races and backgrounds. Arab, Jewish, because one of the fellows is going to be here, but I have to interview him in New York. It's a fellow's working, a young rabbi who went to the Middle East and for 6 years of working with Arab and Jewish reconciliation and stories that he has. And then when you invite people and empower people to say your story is important, just like this guy's story is, they begin to share a story. And the belief is that there becomes a permission, an empowerment, and a contagion, because the idea is contagious empathy is what I'm talking about. How to create contagious empathy in our work and in an organization or in a classroom or in a workshop. And that those stories then become, it could be all kinds of things. It could be chapters in a book. It can be segments in a film. Or certainly chapters in a webinar, scenes in a particular webinar, or just an authentic live experience that other people can then experience, however that is. And how do I, and here's just happens to be an article that was in the Harvard Business Review very recent, kind of recently, September 21st, 2015.
Yep.
And it's after the Jeff Bezos Amazon headline about how workers at Amazon are feeling abused
Oh yes,
and
that was
mistreated.
going around. Yeah.
And in the research that these folks have done with Fortune 500 companies here, but around the globe, they've done surveys about what issues do you think boldness, perseverance, grit, toughness, technical skills, and consistently empathy and emotional intelligence come out as one or two in what they think is most significant to help teams be innovative, survive, get the best information in order to deliver your service or product. And when you talk about it in the classroom, it's even more so, that kind of issue. Because I have to market this, not just to schools and nonprofits and all that nice and stuff, but also to folks who say, they used to pay me a lot of money to go in and do diversity until I trained everybody of how to create their own diversity. They now have diversity heads and diversity this and that. And so, not that that's authentic and that that's succeeding, but it's succeeding more than when you didn't have it. So, I've been going through both the concept of the storytelling and the issue of contagious empathy. And what kinds of people do I gather together who have within us, but you, so many of these stories that, and I want to just stop for a second and unfairly ask you.
Oh, gee whiz.
Jesuit High School,
Okay.
25 black kids and 600 and some others,
Right.
okay?
Wow.
And you were the head of a black student organization at the high school.
Right.
And you, in the periodical, you wrote a poem.
Yes.
For me, it's that story, however you can share it, and then jump to Chicago and walking down the street feeling very angry and empowered after the Black Panther conference.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, somebody starts walking towards you. Remember the whole question of what you feel like doing, and then
Right.
somebody else came?
Right.
Okay? So I think that's a very wonderful, however you tell it, if
Yeah.
you're willing to do that. I think folks, that would be a wonderful additional grist or, stimulus, and then we can open it up.
Instead
Okay.
of the other 999.
I know.
That's right, that's right.
Likes this one specifically.
Well, I'll try to make it brief, actually. But I was lucky enough that someone thought I had some brains, I guess, way back. I won't give you, I won't give dates here, in the 60s, mid-60s. And I won a scholarship to attend a Jesuit boarding school. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, next door to Ferguson, as a matter of fact. Okay, but so I won a scholarship. I was one of the first group of African Americans to attend the school in 1966, actually. And it was in the middle of Wisconsin, Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, Campion Jesuit High School. Okay, so during, I guess, my sophomore year, and again, this is layered, but I'll still try to do as much as I can. I won the scholarship because of the Jesuits' involvement in the inner city in St. Louis, Missouri, in my middle school. So they had come in and they had run a tutoring program, similar to some of the stuff that you're doing, where they would actually pick kids up from their homes. They had begged, borrowed, and gotten vehicles, and they got a house, and they named it North House, the North Star. Related to slavery and the whole thing. So it was my first experience with Jesuits. But it was also there that I really developed a real sense of pride in who I was as a person, as a black person. Here are these young white Jesuits who were teaching us about Malcolm X and this guy named Martin Luther King, and why we should listen to their speeches and why we should read these things. So by the time I went to the school, I was kind of ready, So I had no real imposter syndrome at all going to this all-white school. And within a year, we had started a Black Student Union that we named the Black Action Cell, BLAC. We just called it Black.
I like it.
BLAC. During the mid-60s, as some of you may remember, there were a lot of, talking about the Black Panthers, there were a lot of murders that were done by the police of Black Panthers around the country. And one that touched me to the core was murders that occurred in Chicago. And this was 1968. About 3 Black Panthers were attacked and murdered by the police about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
While they were asleep.
Yeah, while they were asleep.
Very
and,
dangerous.
the pictures even show that they were in their beds and the whole thing. And I was just so enraged for at least a week or two about this. And I was just carrying this rage. And it just so happened that we had a student